Hello, and welcome to today's National 8A Association webinar. I'm Haley Bingham, Deputy Director with the National 8A Association. The National 8A Association is a nonprofit with a mission to provide education and guidance for all aspiring, current, and graduate 8As. We're also proud to work with all types of minority small businesses, agencies, large primes, and industry professionals. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this webinar is being recorded and all materials will be posted on our website. And if you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat box and select everyone or email us at events@national8aassociation.org. I'd now like to introduce you all to today's speakers, Kevin Brancato with Technomile and Jay Shah, former Octo. Please join me in welcoming our speakers as they dive into the C-suite lessons to help you successfully scale your 8A business. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Haley. I'm Kevin Brancato. I lead product here at Technomile, and we're really excited to have Jay Shah come in and really tell us the lessons learned that he has had from his distinguished career of really leading the operations of one of the most successful, I think, startups and smaller businesses in the federal market. Jay was COO of Octo, which has recently become a part of IBM. So we're going to have this engaging conversation. Could you lay out some more details about who you are, where you came from? That would be helpful.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Happy to share, the 15 plus years of experience I had at Octo. So up until 60 days ago, I was Chief Operating Officer at Octo. The year prior, we had been acquired by IBM. Maybe kind of stepping backwards, I joined Mehul as the CEO and founder of the company in 2008. He started the business in 2006. And I was part of Octo through really all of our growth inflection points, and I'll talk a little bit about those experiences. Played a number of different roles, predominantly focusing on our health business. We then took on a private equity partnership with Arlington Capital Partners in 2019. And at that time, I shifted from running our health business to the Chief Operating Officer. And then from 2019 through our exit with IBM, we went through 4 different acquisitions. Really exciting time as we built the business, welcomed some amazing companies into the fold as part of Octo, and we grew roughly 1,500 employees, and then had a great exit in partnership with IBM, and that's been ongoing now for the last year. So really, as a startup, you play a lot of different roles, a lot of different hats for a lot of the folks that I'm sure have started their businesses know. And then as you get larger, as we did, then you start to pick focal points that really are key to growing the business. So it was really privileged to be the COO and really enjoyed my time there.
So for everyone, this might make sense. Well, why would Technomile be part of this relationship is that we've been part of the technology solution that Octo had in its growth journey. And so I think that's part of the reason we're having this discussion is that I think what people to understand is that there is a process, there's technology, and it's all these other lessons. As you and I have been discussing in the lead up here, there is, I think, tremendous lessons learned that you're able to share. In fact, it was pretty shocking to me that some of the lessons that you have had that are very straightforward, particularly, I think if we want to follow this discussion stage to stage, what the sort of best practices are early for a company that is small, it's just starting out. And I think it caught me by surprise that you have some pretty hard lessons learned there.
Yeah, so certainly I've been approached by a number of companies, of different size ranges, and there's a lot of attraction to candidly repeating the Octo story. I caution the first lesson learned is to compare yourself to the Octo we were that matches your longevity. So you shouldn't really be looking at the Octo of 2023 as we exited to IBM as a point of comparison. You should really think about where you are in your journey, and if you've been in business for 3 years, then it's more relevant to look at kind of the lessons learned and makeup of what we were at that mark. But if I look back at our growth from when I joined, I think there was really a set of key, as I refer to these inflection points that were really important to us as we grew. And each one of these inflection points, we had a very specific strategy around growing and operating the business that was focused on scale and being able to survive past many of the small business, kind of credentials that you have. So the first lesson learned as I look back, and really our first inflection point, has to do with de-risking your dependency on a single customer. And there's certainly multiple schools of thought. Being very focused on a single customer can be great for your brand, but it's also awfully risky. And often is the case with most small businesses 8 days when they start, their client relationship is not a prime relationship. It's through a prime partner. So at Octo, very early on, those first few years, like every small business, you start with a handful of customers. Often it's a single customer that drives, the impetus to start a business. And our first focal point was, really trying to make sure we did not have an unhealthy amount of work coming in place, right? So you can look at your numbers and you can say 87% of my revenue is coming from either a single customer or even more risky, a single prime. You have to recognize that, people will change. That relationship with that prime or that customer can change very quickly. And so our first imperative was to de-risk and diversify in areas we wanted to grow into. Once we were able to have a healthier diversification of our business, then we really started taking a hard look at reducing dependency on single primes. So again, as a small business, 8A startup, you're going to need to depend on the partner ecosystem. But it really takes, again, that main POC and contracts or in that business unit line of the partner you're working with to leave. And then all of a sudden you're resetting the relationship. And candidly, this is the business we're in, your value to a partner is as good as it is for them to be able to take over that relationship themselves with the customer. So, I think this premise of having strategic partnerships, it's to be very careful about, putting all of your eggs in one basket. And so I think second inflection point is really diversifying our prime relationships. And so once we had diversification of customer, diversification of partners, then we really wanted to control our own destiny. And so focusing on prime contracts. And when you start off as an 8A or HubZone or SWSB, obviously you want to take advantage of that status, but it's, I think as most know, it can be very attractive to just stay in that space of always using the 8A and the HubZone. But take advantage of it while you can. After you have diversification of customer and prime, focus on those prime contracts. And then once you have prime set aside work, you have a better partner ecosystem and you have strong reputations in that partner space. You have a more diverse set of customers. I think really then we started looking more at full and open prime work. And each of these things were sort of a building block because we had better diversification of customers and partner relationships and candidly experience winning prime set aside work that sort of set us up with the muscle memory to be able to go after prime full and open.
So this appears to be like a really solid recipe book, but I'm sure after the fact you've thought about this, it's obvious that this is the recipe, but there must have been chaos along the way. Like it's not obvious that these are the steps you're going to take. I can't imagine being able to wake up one day and go, well, today I'm going to focus on diversifying primes.
Right.
Right. So I'm just curious if there's a natural point in between where you go like, okay, I have 2 customers or I have 3 customers. And that's solid. Or it's all at once, or these things feel like they're all at once.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. And obviously timing, is everything when it comes to running a business. You could have a whole bunch of prime deals land, partners approach you because they have work that they need a set aside partner for, right? And you should certainly take advantage of that. So, you obviously need to have a strategy. I think in our case, we had these inflection points that we knew were important in terms of knowing when did we feel like we had diversified enough? We have lots of views of our financial data to be able to say, looking at our backlog, do we feel like we're in a better position that if in fact this customer, needed to go a different direction or there was a change with this partner, could we run the business? And so really that was our constant question. These inflection points I'm describing were all about survival. And I think, I know, again, I get a lot of questions on, as a smaller an 8A, they start asking questions around M&A or acquisitions or attracting investors. I think it's important to know when you're running your business, you're not building a business up front. Your motivation shouldn't solely be because you're looking for investors. Your motivation should be, I want to build a sustainable business that can continue past the sort of the set aside status that may be growing, is allowing me to grow.
It's not a get rich quick scheme. There's really, you have to be building this business intentionally in a foundational way. And I think you, as you highlighted, it's really not for the investor. You're not thinking about the investor in this stage. You can't be thinking about the investor at all. Apparently, there's just way too much to worry about in your business to even think about that.
Every day we would, as we were running Octo, would think about how are we building a business that's sustainable? How do we make sure that we can keep folks employed? How do we make sure we have the predictability of backlog to be able to then make investments, right? Once you have predictability of backlog, which you only have once you've de-risked your portfolio, you have better line of sight in your contract backlog, either sub or prime, then you have enough of a basis to start making investment decisions. And obviously there's many investments you can be making to grow your business, but it really starts with having enough backlog to ensure that you have a business to grow.
I think it's these two areas of discipline where you described, you've got these processes in place, and you also have the system to be able to record the information to make the processes work. Was that intentional from the beginning or right from the get-go with Octo?
Yes, it was pretty intentional, in terms of having the right balance of the process, the tools, and the access to the data. I think we benefited prior to Octo. I was at Gartner, Mabel was at Gartner. And so there was a heavy sort of management consulting discipline that the company started with. And I think that was a really important part of our growth DNA because we were able to look at running our business as consultants, which again meant we could look at people, process, and technology. And so we didn't make any sizable investments in tools like CRMs, like Technomile, until we had, really a better handle of the data that we had and how to make decisions from it. But I think, as we grew, we realized it's very easy to say yes to a deal, but we needed the discipline to be able to say no to a deal, right? And I think that's a challenge for a lot of smalls, and obviously there's a lot of flyers and base hits you can look for, and that is a strategy. But ultimately having the discipline to know that, winning a deal, growth is a zero-sum game, right? There is a cost to it, it is going to tax your organization in some way. And so you have to approach your deal governance like it's a zero-sum game. You have to be disciplined enough to be able to say no.
You're speaking my language. As an economist, you're speaking my language, a zero-sum game. And how do you really know that? So it was interesting. So, I mean, when you talked about this recipe book, but you've sort of learned the things that you do and things you don't do and what you can rely on. And we talk about processes, we talk about technology, but people, and the choices you made with people were pretty interesting. Like, how would you go find that business? How would you, who are you going to rely on? And the choices that you made as an organization appear to be very different than the way a lot of organizations center themselves. So you can talk a bit about that.
Certainly when I think about the first, 5, maybe 10 years of the growth trajectory of Octo, I think one thing we did exceptionally well, and certainly is advice I give to a lot of small business CEOs and founders, is you really cannot underestimate the abilities of your own team that exist for your own team to grow. So what do I mean by that? There's sometimes this instinct to look at your team and say, well, I need to hire, the 3 to 4 gray-haired kind of BD, and I have to be cautious because I have more gray hair than I did when I started at Octo. But there's this instinct to say, I need to have someone who's more experienced to be able to come in. And they ignore the fact that the customer intimacy, the strength of the solutioning, the ability to talk to customers, to position you for deals live in your organization. They live with your program managers. They live with your solution architects. We had a lot more success building our growth engine, I'd say in our early years of Octo than we did hiring our growth engine. And I think it's an important discipline to be able to look really closely at the areas where you have deep customer intimacy and take advantage of that relationship. In the sense that if you have capabilities you're trying to grow, the hardest thing to do is sell new capability to new customer. Yet, the number of times a growth officer or a founder is asking me, hey, we need to sell AI, which they don't do, to a customer that they don't serve. It sort of doesn't make any sense to me. Get the base hits, You're not looking at those home runs. Get the base hits, get enough proof point that you can do what you say you're gonna do. And that makes the ability to then chase bigger deals much easier. But you have to go slow to go fast, right?
Yeah.
If you choose to bid $100 million AI gig and you don't have any of that background, you have to recognize, that's going to be incredibly taxing thing to do. And candidly, it's probably not the right move from a growth perspective. So do a deep dive in your existing staff. Again, I think of the homegrown solution architects and the homegrown capture managers we built at Octo. And yes, you can complement that with maybe some external support that may get to a customer they don't have. But almost inevitably, if you rush to hiring a senior BD executive, you're going to, I think, have the wrong impression of what he or she's going to be able to do for you.
It's not magic.
It's not magic, right? Absolutely.
So from the investment in people, you basically have to figure out who's going to work and who's not. And it appears to be a level of judgment. Now, you've come from Gartner, you're analytical people, but it appears that you really have to have a strong emotional intelligence to get these decisions right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for any founder, CEO, depending on the size of your business, you should know where your rock stars are in your organization. You should know where those growth-oriented employees are, right? And it isn't often the most senior person. It's the individuals that sort of have a comfort level in being able to go beyond what their day job is. Again, my advice is that once you find those individuals and I get it, they're likely going to be billable, highly utilized resources. You're probably going to get more ROI out of reducing the utilization of, say, your top 5, top 10, staff that free them up to be able to be more growth oriented than it is to keep them 100% billable and then hire 3 people who would inevitably then need those individuals who have access to the customer anyway.
So this leads you right down to some of your first principles, which you're really saying, focus on your customer, the customer that you have, and sell to the customer that you have. And really, because you get these established relationships with people the organization trusts, and really focus in on that. Simultaneously, really grow there, but also extend beyond. Again, this is the difficult conversation that you have to have every single day. You need to invest in the people who have the relationships, but simultaneously, you have to go get other relationships in other places. So it's just astonishing that it's just that level of flexibility that a leader of a small business needs to have. That's why earlier I'm like, okay, wait, how are you doing all these things at the same time?
Yeah. And that's going back to that playbook, the inflection points. If you now have these really great proof points with the customer you've already built an incredible relationship with, then once you diversify your other customers and your partner ecosystem, that gives you the tools to be able to grow in a way that is so much more effective than if you just had a reliance on one partner and one customer. So there is a relationship between having that diversity and being able to grow beyond just what you're doing. I think another piece of advice is, and again, I kind of tongue in cheek made this AI reference. You have to know what your capabilities are. That isn't to say that there isn't a degree of marketing or aspiration to what you want to do, but you also have to recognize, and I've seen this happen plenty of times where you're chasing a deal and unfortunately you fall in love with the deal and you get to a point where your capabilities aren't there. And so you have to be mindful of what you can actually win with the capabilities you have. And again, when you have an 8A or HubZone or SDV, when you have preferential status like that, you should take advantage of that, not just to grow the business you already do today, but to focus in the aspirational areas that you want to grow into. Because once that status goes away, you miss the window to diversify your capabilities in a way that allows you to chase work that might be more in line with your strategy.
That's a very intentional use of set-asides and of that status. I think for a while I've spoken to a lot of businesses, I'm sure you have, and they see that that's their capability, that it's their status is their thing, and that's what they're going to use. You seem to say, sure, but be very mindful and use it and then understand how to get beyond it
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yes,
It's not like, don't wait till the last, you have 1 or 2 years left in your 8A.
yes,
Like, it's immediately, you seem to be
Yes.
start executing on this, identify it.
yes.
That's very difficult strategy.
There's a difference between someone saying, I'm an 8A business that does app development versus I'm an app development business and I also have an 8A,
Mhm.
right? And so really that lead in does say a lot about, how you're going to be approaching your own growth, right? It's an incredible tool. I will say to Okta's benefit, we didn't get our 8A status until a few years in. So we
Mhm.
actually developed some muscle memory around the competitive space that I think we really benefited from. And so it's a great tool, but it can just as easily be, and everyone said this, it can just as easily be a tool to distract yourself from what you want to do. So again, if you are in a space and your strategy is to grow beyond, I'm a cyber company, but I want to be more than a cyber company,
Mhm.
then you really need to be taking advantage of the status you have, not to grow more cyber work, but to really redefine yourself as the company you want to be and use the status to diversify your capability story. Because once you don't have it, then it becomes hard for you to pivot out of the brand you have.
It becomes something that use M&A to get out of that. Because it's
Absolutely.
late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, in the Octo story, which you're part of this, you're growing, you're diversifying, you're getting you're just basically growing and growing. And then at some point, you're positioned yourself for an equity investment. How does that change things at Octo? And when you're there, what does it change focus? Does it change your processes? Does it change your technology, your alertness? Like, what happens inside there? Because I think there is a shift, but it's hard to describe to folks what you really need to do to make that work.
Yeah, well, certainly, in my experience, we had a fantastic relationship with PE, Arlington Capital, that really believed in the thesis that the executive team that Mabel had and the executives around him had around building a business that was going to be differentiated by the capabilities we have. And that was the thesis that then followed our acquisitions. I get this question a lot around, the drivers behind acquisition, or, should I acquire business because they're a competitor? And really your driver and your strategy for doing M&A should be based on a thesis. It shouldn't just be based on buying other companies in the market to necessarily just have presence there. It should be based on what are the gaps that you have, and what is the overall growth strategy that you need an inorganic tool, M&A, to be able to allow you to drive that growth. And so for us, it was a capability-based story. It was taking the capabilities and solution IP we had from Okta natively and through each of our acquisitions, and really bundling that together. And with a focal point on how do we then make sure that our customers are seeing the benefit of those acquisitions, right? That's another important thing, is how do you take the capabilities you may not have that you get through M&A and immediately get them into the hands of your previous customers?
We can also do this and this, now that the customer that you didn't know, that we now have this AI capability that can be embedded in these other
Absolutely.
solutions that we have.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then be able to convincingly sell that story, do it quickly. Because I think, as an example, you actually were able to do these things very quickly and integrate them very quickly.
Yes.
But how did you get to the situational awareness of this? Like, how can you know all the information that you need to know to make the decisions rapid fire and quickly, to integrate the people, integrate the financials, do all this? It's a daunting task.
Yeah. And look, and two of our acquisitions were over COVID. And so you have the added challenge of the most important thing for any acquisition is connecting to the people, especially, when you're acquiring, other businesses that are of a certain size that are accustomed to sort of that heavy touch from an executive, which I think is important. I think for us, we unlocked a lot of value as part of our integration process. We had a very deliberate focus on our PMR methods, our program management review. And a lot of companies do PMRs solely for making sure that the financials are in order, customer sat's in order, and those are important. We really expanded our PMRs to be able to really have deliberate conversations around cross-selling of capability.
Mhm.
I have a customer, it's a great customer sat, great employee sat, but they are going to company A because we don't do this cyber stuff, right? And then making sure we understand, we just acquired a company that does that. You know, how do we make sure we can connect to the dots, and how can we connect the dots the other way? So we actually called it connect the dots method, right? And so a lot of it was, to your point, you don't know what you don't know. And then we really had a massive focus on knowledge sharing and our knowledge management, sharing that information across the PMs to make sure that they could connect the dots and then allow that sort of cross-selling, which was ultimately, you know, great for the business, but even more so was great for our customers, because then they knew they were getting a different solution than they were before.
So in terms of consolidation of business processes, did having a very strong process to begin with, did you find it easy to pull other organizations in and say, this is how we do it at Octo? Or were you learning from the companies that you had acquired?
Yeah, no, definitely the latter. I think, you know, we had a lot of level setting on, just in a simple example, you know, Octo PMs had a certain expectation of them. And every acquisition we did, we realized not all PMs have the same expectations. Each company, and you go to any business now, there's some variation of what is expected. Oh, the contracts team does that, so you don't have to, or the PMs do that, the contracts team doesn't. And so, you take that same example and apply it to growth, right? What we expected out of our PMs in terms of capture was maybe different than the other companies we acquired. And so there was a constant sort of rehoning of the processes, right? We never said this is the Octo way, you know, and thou shalt follow it,
The
right?
processes, the tools, everything gets.
Everything was up for debate because we wanted to have a better product out of the family we're building through the acquisitions. I will say things, you know, for example, some of the tool investments we made, you know, certainly Technomile was one of them, you know, that having a standardized CRM did make the integration of multiple CRMs and multiple pipelines very easy. You know, so those are some of those early investments we made that I think were really important because it allowed us to have a more uniform view of the collective pipeline that we were chasing.
So from a top level perspective, you've gone through this entire effort. Maybe there are some sort of key lesson takeaways for C-suite executives of these smaller companies, be it 8A or not, that you really think are, that you want to highlight for folks. I mean, what you've identified already is very valuable. I'm not sure if there's anything else that you want to cover here.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, I do think, you know, that premise of, you know, it's very easy to say yes to a deal. The advice I got from my predecessor was you never fall in love with the deal. And I think that's an important message, right? And I think really proving to your organization, so many organizations ultimately have a governance process and then they have, you know, an override vote, you know, from the CEO and founder. And that's always the case, right? But really you have to be careful because every time you have a governance process and you have a founder CEO that chooses to override that decision, that creates an impression amongst your growth executives, your operational executives, that you don't actually have the discipline to allow the data to help you make those decisions. So, you know, I think really upfront having an investment in that governance, really understanding the deals that you won and lost. Have you really done the retrospectives on them? Have you really understood our governance stage gates gave us the warnings here, but we chose to move forward. Okay, well, how do you improve that the next time? You know, we did retrospectives on deals. We looked at government feedback for deals we won and deals we lost. And that allowed our proposal team to make improvements, our contracts team, our pricing team. We took that information and then said, we have to learn from this.
Yeah, a lot of companies are so striving for growth that they seem to forget that the process really is important and is actually fundamental to being able to do
And
this.
it doesn't, you know, it can be very lightweight, right? People are worried about falling under the weight of a heavy governance. You know, again, we used Technomile to do all of our review boards. We did not need PowerPoint presentations that BD people had to create that took them away from jobs they had. We had the data real time. You know, we used the features. We treated our CRM no differently than email. We said it's that important. The data in it is that important. You check your email 3-5 times a day. I expect you to be in your CRM updating these records so that we have real-time data to make decisions. The other piece of advice I can give is, you know, do not underestimate the importance of investing in the functions that you may not think are directly tied to growth. So for example, contracts. You know, there's this tendency to say, well, let's just keep bidding more. And so I can add maybe some more proposal managers, maybe some more solution architects, but then you forget the paths to the pricing, the contract teams. Those can become very, they are very key to that growth story. So understanding sort of the collective investments you need to make isn't just on the front end. It isn't just the tip of the spear. You have to know that the speed in which you do your teaming agreements and subcontracts, the number of small businesses I've talked to that have won $100 million deal as a sub. So but then they never really protected themselves in their teaming agreement. And so all of a sudden that work share is best athlete, or that work share is contingent on rates. These are all things that a really strong contract team should be focusing on, because you could be so excited about a win and get nothing out of it. And we see that all the time.
I appreciate that insight. I think have time for a couple of questions, and so let's see what people have asked. And so I think there's one at the bottom here, the JD, and so I think it's a great question. What are the qualities and characteristics of an 8A firm should look at in a joint venture partner, and the main outcomes that this 8A firm must capture in the relationship?
Yeah, so I will say we definitely we're very successful with the use of the joint venture, 8A joint venture program. I think the first and foremost, so if you're an 8A, so in the context of not a large looking, but as an 8A, one, I think, again, the characteristics you should be looking for is that partner going to be truly guiding you and mentoring you, right? So I think the whole purpose of the mentor protege program is finding a mentor that will truly take the time to teach you. But a lot of these mentor protege relationships really are where a large business just views it as, I've got my easy button for my 8A set aside or my recompetes, right? And so you have to really, as you qualify the large business, you have to really understand as specifically as you can, what am I getting out of this relationship? And not just the growth side, my contracts team needs maturing. What access are you going to give me to your contracts leadership? My pricing team hasn't figured this out. It's the first time we're doing a cost plus bid. Can you train me to do this, right? And if you can't really have that type of relationship with that partner, then I think you're giving up something key, because you can only do a few of them, right?
Yes.
As an 8A. I think the other thing is you have to make sure you have a shared vision of the markets you want to chase. If you're a successful 8A and you've grown and you've caught the attention of a large business for the mentor protege program, you could be a company that's in CMS, hypothetically, and your strategy is you want to be a health company. All right, well, if you're a CMS player and you want to break into NIH and FDA, then perhaps the strategy for picking your mentor should be companies that can help you do that. Not a company that has 100% of their work in the defense market, where you're going to say, I'm not sure what benefit that would be for me. So really, you're in the
Truly strategic.
You have to understand you're the buyer in that case. So you should be making the right decision on that. And then look, it all comes down to trust, right? Like you have to have a organization that you can trust. And I think in our case, we had all three of those.
Right. Well, maybe if we can answer them pretty quickly. We discussed it earlier. Your strategy previously was to you could bring in a BD person, a real senior BD person, but is to organically identify people who have the strongest relationships, but you could also bring in a strong BD person. When do you know that's right? That's the question that's there. When do you is there a key driver or indicator?
Yeah, I think you should know, if you're going to bring in a strong qualified BD capture person, recognize that there's going to be a lot of questions they're going to have right off the bat that they will need to be effective. They're going to need to know that you have a strong understanding and description of your capabilities. They're going to need to have an understanding of your past performance. They're going to need to have an understanding of your key people. They're going to need to have an understanding of the people they can bring to clients. If you don't have some of that stuff figured out, you're going to hire an experienced $200,000, $300,000 BD person. A lot of that stuff has to get worked. So to answer that question, you need to have a lot of that infrastructure process data, and it's not hard to do. It's there. You just have that discipline to have the right sort of knowledge management repository. Because what you don't want to do is waste 6 months, 9 months then of an experienced BD person who's going to say, I can't really do as much as you need me to do because you don't have some of these basics. So, I think take advantage of the organic talent you have, but you have to have all of those tools in place, I think, to be effective.
Great, thank you. There's one more question. I'm not sure you're the right person to answer it because it asks about the first contract in the government sector. And I think you joined Octo a little bit after it had started. So first contract may not have been while you were there.
Yeah, there was a first contract was work that we did at OSHA. That was our first contract. And similarly, that contract allowed, in the beginning part of the year, represented a big part of our business. And, it's that sort of same point on the strategy, we knew that was great. And that allowed us to able to make the investments he wanted to make in growing. But his focal point as a CEO and founder at a startup was, I can't rest on this, even though I have a good story here and its growth. Like if I don't use this as an opportunity to make the right hires that have market understanding and presence in other areas, then I may only be known for this one customer.
It's all, every success is invested into winning that next success.
Right.
This has been a great conversation. Really want to thank you. It's been wonderful for you to be able to share this with the audience. We might have some additional questions that we can answer after the fact. So great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here and happy to take part in this. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin and Jay, for such an insightful, informative conversation. This has been amazing. As a reminder that this webinar recording will be posted on our website by the end of the day. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining us. And this concludes today's webinar. And we hope you all join us next month. Have a great one.